Welcome back to Blumira Briefings, your weekly download of the top headlines and trends for your security practice. This week, nation-state attackers are teaming up to hit critical infrastructure, a Microsoft OAuth flow is being turned against users in a way that's cleverly diabolical, and a new phishing kit is making MFA look optional. Well, even more optional than it sometimes gets treated anyway. First up, for anyone out there who's been in a coma since last week and is seeing this immediately on waking up, I'm sorry. Also, federal agencies are warning about Iranian cyber groups coordinating with pro-Russia hacktivists and targeting operational technology in critical infrastructure. Now, how'd they get in, you may ask? An elite ODA, sophisticated social engineering attack. Actually, it was just default admin passwords left in place on industrial systems. Then, once granted access, they've been defacing interfaces and breaking systems, with the hacktivist collaborators amplifying the disruption. Nick, what else are we seeing in terms of Iranian activity recently?
Hi everyone, I wish I had a more uplifting story for us for this Blumira briefing, but unfortunately with the things on the news, they are relevant to what we do every day in cybersecurity, so they are worth covering. I want to talk a little bit about the current situation in Iran and how it relates to what we do in cybersecurity day to day, because it does affect some things that we're seeing actually in some of our data. We're seeing some trends that could affect our customers down the road. Right now, I think we're okay. We're actively monitoring the situation, especially as it relates to our customers' data and things we're seeing geopolitically. The main thing I wanted to highlight in the briefing today is the close ties we're seeing evolve between Russia and Iran. So as you may have seen in the news recently, most of Iran's network infrastructure was completely wiped out. There are still some critical cells within the Iranian government that are working towards offensive security, offensive attacks against our allies as well as us in some scenarios, us being the United States. So we are seeing these two nations work together in a more closely knit alliance. For example, we've seen groups like the Cyber Islamic Resistance team up with a hacking group called No Name 057, which is a known pro-Russia hacking group. And they're launching quite large DDoS attacks on Israeli defense contracting sectors, as well as several city governments around Israel. So we've definitely linked those two together there. We're also seeing the Cyber Islamic Resistance claiming that they breached the Israeli health insurance providers, and they actually proved it by leaking some footage showing them actually doing the attack. But going back to the ties between Russia and Iran, we're seeing these two team up against utility companies, governments, things that they can get a foothold into critical infrastructure in not only Israel, but we're seeing Lebanon be targeted today, as well as some surrounding countries. So more to come there. We're actively monitoring the situation. I will say, though, there are a couple of things that our customers can do just to prepare for the worst. We're not sounding the alarms per se. Some of the more official voices in cybersecurity aren't even sounding the alarms themselves yet. Even Israel, we're not seeing sounding alarms. But what we recommend customers do is start to patch things that they may have neglected over time. Internet-facing servers need to be patched so these attackers can't gain footholds into your environment. It's going to be a messy cleanup process if you do start to see some indicators of compromise. So definitely jump on that when you can. Lock down remote access. So a lot of services have, impossible travel detections, logins from new countries. Keep a very close eye on those in the coming days. I'm going to guess that we're going to see a little bit more of that. Iranian as well as Russian attackers connecting to VPNs and trying to log in from various parts of the world. So you might not see Russia or Iran log in, but you might see something like the Netherlands or Germany, just to name a few. So definitely keep an eye on remote access policies in your environment. And then jumping back to what I said about preparing for the worst, start creating some backups. We've seen ransomware target orgs over the past decade-ish now, and backups are always the savior. If you have backups, you might save some money. So definitely get those backups in and train your users while you can. Run some phishing tests. We're seeing some spear phishing out of these nation-state attacks. So run those tests. Try to get your users comfortable with things like that. So if the actual thing happens, an actual attack, they might be able to dodge it for you and your company and themselves. So thanks again, and let's keep monitoring the situation and go from there.
Next, Microsoft's threat intel team flagged a new tactic from Storm 1283 that's worth paying attention to. They're deliberately triggering OAuth errors during sign-in. Then, when the error fires, Microsoft's platform redirect is actually going to a page that the attackers control, which they've set up as a support portal. Users think they're fixing a login problem, but they're actually downloading malware drafting their system into a botnet. It's been effective because it piggybacks on the platform's own expected behavior, so most defenses looking for malicious app consent alerts aren't catching it. Now, Mike, how should organizations prepare for social engineering that exploits the way legitimate systems are supposed to work?
All right, so yeah, we got a new man-in-the-middle phishing kit for auth, Starkiller. This one is kind of I guess it's like an evolution of some of the other ones, like Tycoon, Brief History. Typically, these are proxies. They man in the middle your auth session, or they start an auth session and man in the middle it. And this one's pretty interesting. It's definitely somebody's putting some more effort into this. We're seeing like the tools get better, but also like there's a better back end and dashboard for the attackers. This is one of the ones that it's as a service, right? So their customers are attackers. So they're putting fancy features in there like person in the middle, so an attacker can get alerted when you're authing, and then they have basically some actions that they can do in the middle of you authenticating if they want to. I don't know, change backgrounds, right? Like cancel it, target certain people and not others. This one also does a fair amount of obfuscation. So the proxy is pretty transparent, pretty tough to detect on its own. They're doing a lot of URL obfuscation, so it's not great. Basically, I'll just say this out loud, I guess, in case you need to hear it. Typical old school MFA does not work anymore. OTP, time-based tokens, email tokens, anything that is something right? Not an effective, not an effective MFA control anymore. They're very easily phished. People can trick you into putting them in a prompt somewhere in a browser, and then the proxy grabs it and hands it over, and using headless Chrome to do the session token validation without you ever seeing it. So yes, phishing resistant MFA. That's where you need to be. These are things like YubiKeys, device based apps, things using TPM chips on devices. Windows Hello, that type of stuff, right? Where it's verifying that this device is your device. Because this is only going to get worse. And if you're using non-phishing resistant MFA, it's going to be rough. So, switch if you can't switch. There's some other controls you can put into place. Policy-based authentication, right? Evaluating the authentication to make sure that this device is validated, or right, like impossible travel, these types of things, right? So any kind of like stepped up auth, not just on your first auth, but also on sessions, right? So session, long-term sessions, not a great thing anymore, right? If you have an SSO that has one session and that session lasts forever and is valid on lots of different services, I would definitely recommend looking at more session validation type policies if your SSO supports it, because you may not need to authenticate the user, every day or hour or whatever you decide is right for your org, but you definitely need to evaluate the authentication token, to see if it's still valid or if it moved, several countries away, right? So that's some tips. These tools are just going to keep getting better, so stay safe.
Finally, there's a new phishing as a service kit called Starkiller. Honestly, pretty metal name, that's been gaining traction on dark web markets. It uses adversary in the middle techniques to intercept authentication in real time, scooping up session cookies along with passwords so they can stroll right past MFA and replay those valid sessions to access accounts without tripping any alerts. And it comes as a sleek dashboard complete with GUI control panels, point-and-click setup, so the barrier to entry for pulling off this kind of attack is getting lower every day. I guess that's good news for skiddies, less good news for the rest of us. Chris, as we see more attacks that are entirely bypassing MFA, what's the next step in identity protection that security teams can take a look at?
Yeah, so in the case of the Starkiller Phishing Kit, it's not really doing anything new. I think the thing that's really scary about it is that what it does is it lowers the bar for attackers to be able to do these things. It's a phishing kit as a service, so it's just being passed around, it's being sold. So if you've got the money, you can have it and you can do it yourself. So I think that's really the thing that makes this particular phishing kit scary. Now, with that being said, attacker in the middle stuff, these session token stealers, these reverse proxies, this has been happening for a while, and that's why it doesn't do necessarily anything unique. It's the accessibility that it allows. So the things I want to focus on in terms of what you can do to protect yourself, I know for the longest time security experts have been saying just enable MFA, you'll be good, and now we're getting to the point where we're starting to raise that bar, and unfortunately we have to keep raising that bar higher. So in this case, we have to really focus on the attackers getting access to the tokens, because what's basically happening is they are proxying. They're sitting right in between the user and then the user submitting the data to the actual legitimate website. So the site's legitimate. Everything's legitimate about the connection. The only thing that's not legitimate is the attacker that's sitting in the middle between the victim and the legitimate site. So what we want to focus on is the theft of the token, theft of the stuff, the information itself. And typically how you can protect yourself against those things is having strict conditional access policies and also enabling token protection in Azure and Entra. Basically what token protection does is it requires the token it can only be used on the device that requested it. So it can't be passed around. Typically what happens is attackers will steal these tokens, they'll use them on their own machines, and then they'll be able to get in that way. But if you enable token protection, that actually won't work anymore because it needs to be used on the machine that it was requested on. And then a little bit more about the conditional access policy items. So you can require compliant devices, because like I said, we can't, it's harder to stop the attackers from being able to steal the tokens. It's we're trying to stop them from being able to do anything after they steal them. That's where we're focusing on. So what you can do with conditional access is require compliant devices. You can require all sorts of other different fine-grained policies to only allow logins to certain applications from certain locations for certain users. You can really do a lot to dial up your conditional access policies to restrict attackers from being able to do anything with these session tokens. Another thing you can do to protect yourself is also using FIDO2 hardware tokens. That's things like YubiKeys. There's a such thing as phishing resistant MFA, and that's what FIDO2 hardware tokens fall under for their ability to kind of protect us in these events that an attacker is able to get in the middle of these communications between a victim and the legitimate infrastructure.
So this week, to recap, Iran is exploiting default passwords on critical infrastructure, a legit OAuth flow is getting twisted into a malware delivery mechanism, and a phishing kit dropped with better UX than some of the products and platforms that it targets. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions in the comments. If you need a little bit more briefings in your life, we dropped a video yesterday about some new research from Google's threat intelligence team that you can take a look at.